What does the overall outlook look like?
Well, it doesn't look good, unfortunately. We now have a baseline of a recession in our forecast for the very reasons that Catherine outlined. Not only are we sitting on tariffs that are the highest level since the early 1900s, and a very large tax hike on U.S. consumers and firms. It is also the uncertainty that you laid out. I mean, there is uncertainty is its own tax on economic activity. And so what we're looking for at the jobs numbers, that may likely be the March employment report, the high water mark for the year, which is a very difficult position to be in for the Federal Reserve. But you saw Jay Powell, the chairman of the Fed, lay out that listen, this is a stagflationary kind of environment. He didn't use those words, but he said the risks to the inflation are to the upside now, and the risks to growth are to the downside. And that is exactly what we get, is a mild bout of inflation. He went at great lengths to go through that they are in no hurry to cut rates, which is usually what you see when you see such turbulent times and threats of a recession. The Fed is not going to be as quick to do that, and that much of the Fed leadership has evoked the 1970s as a cautionary tale because they are worried about the lingering effects of inflation when the embers of inflation are still smoldering.
Right. Catherine, some of the countries who are involved in this tariff exchange, if you will, are facing steep tariff hikes from this country, and they may reciprocate in kind. This administration has made clear that it does not have any problem with making big changes in its tariffs policy, even if it means antagonizing some of the countries who are our allies, like Canada. How will all of this affect our alliances around the world, not just the global economy?
I'm so glad you asked that, because so much of the discourse right now has been about the economic pain, which will be real here and abroad. You know, we may well have a global recession, not just a domestic recession. But beyond that, the damage we are doing to our relationships with some of our closest friends may be irreparable, right? Those economic ties are important not only because there are mutual gains from trade and both sides get wealthier, but also because we need our alliances in East Asia, in Europe, in North America, all around the world when we have crises, when you know, 9/11, who came to our aid when we decided to wage war in Afghanistan, but our NATO allies. All of those, all of the building blocks upon which these relationships have been built are now crumbling, because we have shown we are not a reliable partner economically or otherwise. And the next time we need the cooperation of our friends, I don't know that they're going to come to our aid. I mean, we're already seeing this, for example. So shortly after, or I think it was about a week ago, actually, it was before Liberation Day, per se, but about a week ago, China, South Korea, and Japan got together and announced that they were forming a new trade pact. First of all, Japan and South Korea are some of our most important allies in Asia. Second of all, these three countries historically have had a lot of friction amongst each other. So the fact that even they were able to unite in the face of these threats from Donald Trump is really remarkable. They had not had a similar economic dialogue in, I think, about 5 years, and yet Trump was able to bring them together against us. So who are they going to side with next time we have some kind of dispute with China? South Korea and Japan, I imagine, are going to be a little bit more reluctant to take our side on trade or anything else, even if we're in the right.
All right, Diane, you mentioned earlier the 1970s and stagflation. I'll go back even earlier to the 1930s and the Smoot-Hawley tariffs of 1930, which plunged this country and the world into a Great Depression. J.P. Morgan says that these latest tariffs have increased the risk that the United States will slide into a recession within the next year. First, what's the difference between a recession and depression? Can you explain to our audience? And what, if anything, can we do as a country to prevent any of this economic tumult in the upcoming future?
So basically, a depression is a very long period of economic contraction and disinflation or deflation. And that was the one time the Smoot-Hawley tariffs were initiated in August 1930, almost a year into the Great Depression. They levied tariffs on 25 countries. We had trade wars with 10 of those 25 countries. Global trade contracted by 67% and plunged us deeper into the depths of the global depression. That was one of the seeds that sowed the seeds for World War II. And that's why, coming out of World War II, we began to remove many of these trade barriers and try to do the Marshall Plan and increase economic linkages around the world to prevent another repeat of a major global war. I think that's a very important lesson to come back from. But we're talking about tariffs that are now exceeding those of the Smoot-Hawley tariffs, going back to the Gilded Age, a period that was punctuated by extreme inequality. We did not have a government that funded things like Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid, let alone a whole group of programs. And we also had very low productivity growth. So this was a period that concentrated power among just a few key players. And the research on it is not what we want to do. To prevent that, you want to have trust and lift tariffs. And to get to Catherine's point as well about the erosion of trust. Trust is the oil of a market economy. When we have eroded trust, not only in our institutions, but with our trading partners, that creates damage and increases the cost no matter what. It's hard to go back from this. Trust lost is lost faster than it is regained.
All right. Thank you, Catherine Rampell and Diane Swank. Coming up next.